the redeemed of the Lord say to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know.
Welcome to Say So, where we talk about it, whatever it is. Because what you do not know can hurt you. So let's get to the root. Thank you. So, where we talk about it, whatever it is. Because what you do not know can hurt you. So let's get to the root. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Letitia R. Stuckey. For today's episode, we're going to continue in the same vein of the series entitled From Childhood Abuse to Domestic Violence. We're going to continue to connect the dots as it pertains to individuals who have experienced domestic violence. Just to review, we have previously talked about what exactly is domestic violence. We've talked about what it is because emotional abuse typically does not leave physical scars like physical abuse does. Emotional abuse does leave scars, but they're not usually visible to others. We highlighted the 10 signs you have experienced emotional abuse as a child, because some individuals may have suppressed it or repressed it and not remembered that led to the experience with emotional abuse. In another episode, we covered the signs an adult was abused as a child. And the reason for highlighting this in particular is because as individuals, we date, we select mates that we want in our lives, and we select even friends going to tell you the whole story. So if you are aware of what the signs are and you're dating an individual, you are better able to make a conscious quality decision regarding whether or not you want to allow this person to continue to be around you or your children. And if you can see some of the red flags that they've been abused as a child and they're not done any work to heal those wounds or to heal those experiences, those childhood traumas, then the likelihood that they will abuse you and your child increases dramatically. So today we're going to focus specifically on the effects of domestic violence on children. It's important to note that many children exposed to violence in the home are also victims of physical abuse. Children who witness domestic violence or are victims of abuse themselves are at serious risk for long-term physical and mental health problems. And in relation to this, even now, the Department of Social Services, they, coupled with law enforcement, charge the parent or the parents with the child being in that sort of environment. And a part of the reason is because if that child, they themselves are at risk, or if they're only seeing it or hearing it or just experiencing the drama, the yelling, all of the chaos that goes along with that during their childhood, then they know that there are long-term and short-term effects. So that's part of the reason why now you could even be charged criminally with children be exposed in this environment that you know is unhealthy. Children who witness violence between parents may also be at greater risk of being violent in their future relationships. Hence, the review of the signs that an adult has been abused as a child, because domestic violence is a learned behavior. And as parents, we don't have to sit our child down and say, listen, this is what I want you to learn. This is the lesson. This is the takeaway. This is the reward. This is the advantage versus the disadvantage. Living a life or a lifestyle in front of your child is teaching them not to be like you or some combination of being like you in certain ways and not like you in other ways. So it's just very important for us to know that you're building an unhealthy foundation for your child in future relationships. If they're seeing you and their dad or you and their mom get into physical altercations or curse each other out and breaking stuff and things of that nature, that's chaotic. and it's unpredictable when that will happen. It may happen at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and they have school the next morning, but they're supposed to go to school and pretend like nothing is wrong, although their sleep was broken or they may have been scared. So these are things that definitely affect the child growing up in this environment. Typically, they say you are a product of your environment, and given the fact that most individuals who've experienced child abuse also go on to experience domestic violence, whether they're the victim, the perpetrator, or some combination, maybe you're going to fight back. So you may be the victim. They may hit you first, but then you're going to hit them back. So now you're the perpetrator as well, because you're giving blows as well as receiving blows, and it's just unhealthy any way you slice it when it comes to domestic violence. So if you are a parent who is experiencing abuse, it can be difficult to know how. Usually, if there's violence in the home, the child is a victim as well. So if the mother or the father, if the individual or the adult cannot protect themselves, then how are they going to be able to protect their child? We're going to go and focus on what are the short-term effects of domestic violence or abuse on children. It's important to know that children in homes where one parent is abused may feel fearful and anxious. They may always be on guard, wondering when the next violent event will happen, and we call this walking on eggshells. So not only is the victim walking on eggshells, trying to do everything perfect and do everything right and not do what they've been asked not to do, which has precipitated abuse in previous times, but they're trying to avoid abuse at all costs. So the children are also anxious and walking on eggshells because they don't want mommy and daddy or stepdad or boyfriend or baby daddy or whoever to get into an altercation. Cause them to react in a lot of different ways. Here we have listed different ages and stages of how the child or children may react when there's been domestic violence in the home or in their immediate environment. Children in preschool are young children who witness violence with an intimate partner may increase crying and whining, almost trying to go back to a baby stage where they're dependent. They also develop difficulty falling or staying asleep. Signs of night terrors such as stuttering or hiding, or signs of severe separation anxiety. The difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep could be because sometimes the explosion, if you will, erupts at times of the morning or disturbs their sleep. So they may be afraid to go to sleep. Part of their fear of going to sleep may be, what if something happens to mommy or daddy or both of them while I'm asleep? So if they're worried, they may stay up because they don't want anything to happen, or they want to be awake or aware if something does happen. The signs of severe separation anxiety could stem from them being fearful that mom or dad is going to get hurt or even killed. So around them and can become really clingy. For school-age children, they may feel guilty about the abuse and blame themselves for it, especially in a situation if the parents get into an argument or altercation over something they did, or the conversation is surrounded by their behavior, or they got in trouble at school again, or something like that. So the child will feel guilty and blame themselves. And a lot of times this may be founded or it may be unfounded, because as I said in previous episodes, children just find a way to blame themselves. Children just find a way to blame themselves. If I was a better child, if I was cuter, if I didn't cry so much, they will find a reason to blame themselves for what is going on in their environment around them. Domestic violence and abuse hurts children's self-esteem. They may not participate and have fewer friends than others and get into trouble more often. They also may have a lot of headaches or stomach aches. So sometimes with fear and anxiety, your stomach can feel like it's balled in a knot because you're just anxious, you're tense, you don't know what's going to happen, and things in your life are chaotic and unpredictable. So it's like your body is just almost waiting for something to happen. So it's in a alert state. It's in red alert all the time, which can cause headaches from tension or different migraine headaches or whatever, and stress induced headaches, as well as stomach aches. When they talk about it lowering the children's self-esteem and them aches. When they talk about it lowering the children's self-esteem and them not participating, sometimes it's also due to the worry that they're worried about their parent or worried about what may be going on in their absence. Once again, which feeds back into the separation anxiety. So the child may not even want to go to school and separate from their parents because all day is worry about what's going on. They may not be motivated to play during gym time or free period or whatever. They may just sit and think because they're worried. Their body is there at school, but their mind is somewhere else with their parents and concerned. Or something may have happened the previous night where they just are unable to focus. So school to what's going on with the family as it pertains to school-age children. So the next group is teens who witness abuse may act out in negative ways. Some of these ways are fighting with family members or skipping school. Other ways are they may eating with family members or skipping school. Other ways are they may engage in risky behaviors such as having unprotected sex and using drugs or alcohol. As previously discussed in another episode, what drugs and alcohol does is they self-medicate. So they don't have to feel the fear or anxiety as long as they're high on something or as long as they're drunk and out of their mind. The unprotected sex, as I said, wounded children make wounded adults. Unprotected sex, if you get pregnant, then now you're a parent or on your way to being a parent, and your child will likely be reared in an unhealthy environment because after the explosion, there is a honeymoon period where the aggressor or abuser perpetrator is sorry, they're apologizing, they're crying, they're going to go to counseling, they're going to do better. They don't know why they did that. They're sorry. They love you and the children so much, they'll never do it again, and all of that. And then, of course, as time goes on, more tension builds up, and it's just a cycle. And those three phases are the main phases as it pertains to domestic violence. So with the added stress of a teenage pregnancy, or your son or your daughter having someone pregnant or being the one that is pregnant, that's an additional stressor. And that may cause the teen to use an additional stressor. And that may cause the teen to use drugs even that much the more, to try to self-medicate or forget, things of that nature. So it's just a slippery slope that once you start going down it, it's a spiral downward. They may have low self-esteem because honestly, nobody is pouring into them. They're likely not getting out. Behavior is to get attention, because even bad attention is attention, right? Especially in a situation where you're being ignored because your parents are at each other. They may not be invested or interested or have conversations about what's really going on with you. So that is where the unprotected sex and the peer pressure could come in. The pressure to even have sex because all your friends say they're doing it or they are doing it. You have a boyfriend and you want to feel loved, the love that you should be getting from your father in a healthy manner, but because he's absent or he's cheating or he's doing whatever, something other than focusing on rearing you, then you're looking for love in all the wrong places. And on rearing you, then you're looking for love in all the wrong places and all the wrong people. And your self-esteem is low, so you don't have the confidence within yourself. Set boundaries and say, these are certain things that I will do and this is what I will not do. Your desire to fit in and belong becomes more inflated than you esteeming your fit in and belong becomes more inflated than you esteeming yourself in a high or healthy regard. So if they want to smoke, if they want to drink, if they want to club, if they want to sneak out and do things of that nature, you're going to do that because you want to be accepted. Also, in situations where there's domestic violence, runaways is really common because, as previously stated, sometimes the child or children are victims. So because you're getting older, the punishment or the consequences for negative behavior might become physical, as opposed to just if you have to stand in the corner of that nature, it may intensify because you're bigger and there's a lot of anger and stress floating around in your environment. So in addition to low self-esteem, they may have trouble making friends and feel or be isolated or withdrawn. They may start fights or bully others. And I think we not only look at the individual that's targeted, but we look at the bully, because what is causing you to bully? Where are you seeing these bullying behaviors? What gives you the right to want to put your hands on somebody? What gives you the right to want to curse or talk down to people? And typically, like I said, it's a learned behavior. They're learning it in-house. So if we some of these bullying situations, once we shine the flashlight into the house, we may also see that there's domestic violence, and or that the bully is being bullied at home and physically abused. And because they're angry and all of that stress is building up on the inside of them, they're exploding on someone else at school, on someone they feel is safe to explode, or may just not be a fighter and would rather talk about it or resolve the issue in another way that doesn't involve a physical altercation. They're more likely to get in trouble. We're still talking about the teens who are reared in households where there's domestic violence. They're more likely to get in trouble with the law, because they honestly feel like their parents don't care. They may feel like my mama don't love me and my daddy don't love me. They don't care about what's going on in my life. I've gotten pregnant. I'm out here on drugs and they don't care, and I don't know what to do. Things of that nature. So they may be feeling lost, and they may fall in with the wrong crowd. They could become a part of or involved in gang crowd. They could become a part of or involved in gang activity. So now you're breaking the law in addition to all of the other things that you're doing. This type of behavior is more common in teen boys with having issues or run-ins with the law, who were abused in childhood, than teen girls. And it says that girls are more likely than boys to be withdrawn and to experience depression. And I'm not sure how long ago this article was written, but I would venture to say that now the playing field has been leveled a little more, because there are also girls who get in trouble with the law, more aggressive crimes. So it's not, they not get the physical abuse, they may get the sexual abuse. Or in situations where a parent that is alcoholic, when the father is an alcoholic, they are more likely to suffer not only physical abuse, but in some cases also sexual abuse. So this would cause girls to act out as well. And they could become violent, and they could become aggressive, and they could not care about the law, because once again, when something that traumatic happens in home and it's your father or your mother who is abusing you, you feel like they don't care. You feel like it's you against, they don't care. You feel like it's you against the world. So who cares about the law? Who cares about breaking the law? What's the worst thing they can do to me? Put me in jail? Well, maybe then I'll get a break from being raped every night, or from being molested, or from being beat up. So that's fine with me. That's a little vacation. So we're going to domestic violence or abuse on children. More than 15 million children in the United States live in homes in which domestic violence has happened at least once. These children are at a greater risk of repeating the cycle as adults by entering into abusive relationships or becoming abusers themselves. For example, a boy sees his mother being abused is 10 times more likely to abuse his female partner as an adult. A girl who grows up and abuses his female partner as an adult. A girl who grows up in a home where her father abuses her mother is more than 6 times as likely to be sexually abused as a girl who grows up in a non-abusive home. So it's basically saying that dysfunction begets your environment, then what you grow up in, who you grow up around, plays a role in who you become. If there is no intervention, if there is nothing done to change your thought process or your mindset. Now, there are some times, and I would assume that these individuals are the generational curse destroyers, because their mindset, they may be going on between their parents or the adults in their lives, in their home, but they make a conscious quality decision to do the opposite. And there are times when they are the exception to the rule. And as it pertains to destroying generational curses, notice I said destroy and not break, because as my How many times have we broken a glass, or our children broken a toy, something chipped off, and we get some tape or we get some glue or something of that nature and we fix it? And yes, it was broken, but now it's not broken. So we have to be careful not to break the generational curse, because the enemy in every piece, and it may skip a generation, but they fix it and now it's effective and it works for the next and the following generations. If you destroy a thing, you annihilate it, you obliterate it. It cannot come back again because it is no more. You completely eliminate it from the equation. So common to be sexually abused. And these statistics are good to just know and highlight what issues are present. They're not 100% because most abuse and trauma goes unreported. So I would venture to say there are males that are sexually abused as well as females, and there are females that are sexually abused as well as females, and there are females that are physically abused as well as males. And like I said, there are some females that suffer the brunt of both of these things. So I think it's just important to just highlight, regardless of the sex, that once you've experienced abuse, you're more likely of the sex that once you've experienced abuse, you're more likely to reproduce that in your future relationships, because as I said, that's your foundation. My book, Cast Down But Not Destroyed, Destiny's Child. Childhood is the foundation on which we stand as adults. If your foundation is the foundation on which we stand as adults. If your foundation is insecure, if it has cracks, if it has uneven places, if it has anything that's damaged or wounded or injured it, then if that is not rectified, if that is not healed, if that is not fixed, then a rickety foundation to build on. So how are you going to build a healthy marriage? How are you going to be a healthy parent? How are you going to be a healthy individual coming from this sort of foundation? And for individuals who are in construction or architects, your foundation is the beginning phase. So if you're building on something that's already not steady, weakened at the core, what do you expect the outcome of that to be? And how long do you expect it to hold a marriage? How long do you expect it to hold being a parent? How long do you expect it to even hold and support your weight if it's already damaged and weak in and of itself? Children who witness already damaged and weak in and of itself. Children who witness or are victims of emotional, physical, or sexual abuse are at higher risk for health problems as adults. So I'll just go ahead and review once again what emotional abuse and physical and sexual abuse is. So emotional abuse is verbal or nonverbal. Examples of this is being criticized, name calling, making decisions for you. And physical abuse is use of physical force against another in a way that ends up injuring or puts the person is pushing someone, hitting them, choking them, kicking them, or threatening them with a weapon. Sexual abuse is often linked to physical abuse. They may occur together or after a bout with physical abuse. So examples of this is forcing unwanted sex or sexual acts, minimizing the feelings or preferences about sex of the person that likely was just abused, just hurt or harmed in some way. And the definition of domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain control over another intimate partner. So the premise of domestic violence is power and who witness or are victims of emotional, physical, or sexual abuse are at higher risk of health problems as adults. And these problems include mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety. And typically depression and anxiety has been known to be something that females experience on a personal level males that are depressed, males that experience anxiety, males that even have eating disorder or become emotional eaters because they are depressed. Then they eat a lot or they overeat, or because they are angry or they're anxious, or different very strong feelings are present and it can angry or they're anxious, or different very strong feelings are present and it can lead them to eating certain things. I personally feel that your system can be depressed, but your mind is not necessarily depressed. So there are times when you're craving and wanting things to make you feel good, like snacks or sweets or chocolate or happy hormones. So endorphins is what we call them. In your minds, pleasure hormones are endorphins. So chocolates, things like sex, things that taste good like snacks, something that's sweet or something that's salty or something that you just crave, some fried chicken or whatever you might be craving. Once those things are satisfied, least. These are just other ways as it pertains to mental health conditions. Other conditions include diabetes, obesity, and obesity could be to the emotional eating, and heart disease, poor self-esteem, and other problems. It's just amazing to me how low self-esteem or poor self-esteem and other problems. It's just amazing to me how low self-esteem or poor self-esteem keeps coming up. And I did a previous series on self-esteem because all of these things build upon another. A child with low self-esteem becomes an adult with low self-esteem if there is no intervention, if there is no help, if there is nothing to assist and aid them with improving their self-esteem. And most individuals don't make the best choices when it comes to themselves. They may advocate for other people, but as it pertains to them, they take one for the team every time. They'll be talked down to, they'll be abused, and take it and get up and keep moving. There are other problems and experiencing health problems, mental and physical health problems. The question then becomes, can children recover from witnessing or experiencing domestic violence or abuse? And one answer can be found in my book entitled Cast Down But Not Destroyed, Destiny's Child. In my book entitled Cast Down But Not Destroyed, Destiny's Child. It's on page 49 in chapter 7, which is entitled Where is Home? And the response is, in my opinion, yes, children can and do recover when there is one disruption after another in their lives. Now, recovery, simply put, means to return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength. And in my personal opinion, instead of returning to normal, because if you were raised and reared in this environment and these are your parents and have been your parents, there is not a normal. So you would go to recovery. But being healthy in mind and having a reasonable amount of strength varies from one individual to another. Now, recovery looks different for all of us. I believe that it is possible to make a full and complete recovery from your past. I do know that you cannot recover. And I specify this because a lot of times when you've dealt with trauma and abuse, it causes you to withdraw or isolate and not want to be around people, not want to talk to people, not trust people. And because you don't trust them because the people in your life previously have hurt you, have injured you, have wounded you, have abused you. People in your life previously have hurt you, have injured you, have wounded you, have abused you, have raped you, or, caused some sort of adverse effect in your life. Their role was not positive, so you don't trust people in general. This begins as early as infancy. There was a study done in relation to failure to thrive children, and it was discovered that children who are not bonded with when they should be as children who are left to fend for themselves pretty much, who are left alone and they cry because they're hungry or because they're wet and just are not bonded with consistently or the way that they need to be. Having that skin to skin contact is so imperative, and when they don't have that, they fail to thrive. And a lot of times some infants become weakened or immune system and even die. But those things, like if you cry, someone comes to see what's wrong with you, to see if they can rectify the situation or offer you something that will stop you from crying or ease whatever discomfort you're feeling. then they're more likely to flourish. And honestly, that could even start the beginning seeds into your self-esteem, because for you to have confidence and feel that you mean something and that you are loved and that you are valued, then if someone comes to you when you're hurt, or you have someone to come to and let them know that you're hurt, or to talk to you, or to be there and present with you, then that makes a world of difference. But if you don't, you don't esteem, makes a world of difference. But if you don't, you don't esteem yourself very highly, because the individuals in your family or in your home have not esteemed you very highly based upon their actions. The last sentence says it requires recovery, that is, requires trusting someone, people that are allowed back there in the delivery room. Not everybody is allowed back there for a reason. Not everybody should see you in that state. Not everybody should see you in distress or in pain. So it's just important to know and to note that I personally believe children can recover from witnessing, or each child responds differently to abuse and trauma. Some children are more resilient and some are more sensitive. How a child is at recovering from abuse or trauma depends on several things, including, they only have 3 bullet points here, but I'm sure there's more. The first one is they only have 3 bullet points here, but I'm sure there's more. The first one is a good support system or good relationships with trusted adults. Because if you've ever had adults in your lives that are not trustworthy, or that betrayed your trust in the form of abuse or neglect, things of that nature, the alternate is a trusted adult. Because you may not trust adults after experiencing those things. But the way to mend a broken heart would be with someone that actually values you and that values your heart and takes special care of it than the individuals that broke it. Another help a child recover from abuse and trauma is high self-esteem. So improving or increasing their current level of self-esteem. Another way is healthy friendships. So once again, this is increasing what was already low or almost non-existent, putting healthy things where already low or almost non-existent, putting healthy things where unhealthy things were, and being able to trust where there was previously mistrust. So it's basically the opposite response or reaction to what they've known, to their environment, to their experiences. Although children will probably never forget what they saw or experienced during the abuse, they can learn healthy ways to deal with their emotions and memories as they mature. So there is hope. The sooner a child gets help, the better his or her chances for becoming a mentally and physically healthy. Violence is no one gets help. You've seen this, you've experienced this as a child, but you don't get help. And what I personally feel and have experienced a lot of times is in the African American culture, we're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with us. We don't want to be stigmatized. We don't want to be labeled. So we're going to continue to hold on to these generational curses. We're going to continue to sweep it under the rug, because what goes on in our house stays in our house. And it's nobody's business. And we don't need help because we're okay. We're just a little stressed. That's it. We can have a cigarette and a beer or whatever and we'll feel better with yourself. We can have a cigarette and a beer or whatever and we'll feel better with your self-medicating. That's just covering or masking the real root issue. So I think it's important, definitely, as it says, the earlier the child or children get help, the better chances they have of recovering and becoming mentally or physically healthy. I started out experiencing childhood neglect and childhood abuse at a very early age. There was, even to the extent where Child Protective Services became involved. Once they became involved, there was no aftercare. Now, I can't confirm or deny that there was no aftercare plan, but all I know is that once my siblings and I went to live with supervised visitation, there was no visitation even consistently between my siblings and I. There was no counseling or no follow-up to even find out what had happened or what we saw or experienced. I think a lot of times people feel like children are too young to remember, but even as they said, you may never forget something that changes your mind frame and your mindset about things. So at a young age, you can experience trauma, and that is almost seared into your consciousness, to your mind, and it doesn't matter how young you are. So the next question becomes, how can I help my children recover from witnessing and experiencing domestic violence? So this is in a situation where potentially the foundation is childhood abuse and neglect and trauma. Nothing has happened to heal or to help that individual process all of their experiences and things that they've gone through. So now they've gotten into relationships as teens and or adults, and they've found themselves in a tangled web of domestic violence. They've left. Their focus now is returned back to the children, so they want to make sure that their children recover. After ways that they can recover, there are 6 of them, and they include, but are not limited to, helping them to feel safe, talking to them about their fears, talking to them about healthy relationships, talking to them about boundaries, helping them find a reliable support system, and getting them professional help. So, going back to helping them feel safe. Children who witness and experience domestic violence need to feel safe. Consider whether leaving the abusive relationship might help your child feel safer. Talk to your child. Abusive relationship might help your child feel safer. Talk to your child about the importance of healthy relationships. So if the child has been a victim, either directly or indirectly, directly meaning they were physically or sexually abused in some way, shape, or form. Indirectly means they're hearing, seeing to the people they love in front of their eyes. They may feel safer by getting out of that environment because the threat of that person beating them, abusing them, molesting them, or whatever is no longer at that point. So they may feel safer. Important to talk to your child about the importance of healthy relationships. And I feel the element or the key piece that's missing, because if you're not talking to the child and you just get them out that situation and you never process with them what went wrong, you never evaluate how we got to this point and what we're going to do differently going forward to never find ourselves at this point again, then that would likely increase the possibility or the risk that they will go and find somebody that's going to treat them like daddy did, or go and find somebody that's going to treat them like mommy did, because you haven't processed it. You haven't talked about it. You haven't said what's wrong and what was right, if anything. And bullet point says talking to them about their fears. Let them know that it's not their fault or your fault. Because once again, children will find a way to make it their fault, to blame themselves. So we want to take that burden off of their shoulders and that yoke from off of their neck. We want to learn more, access it because of their age, and it's just not appropriate for them to know about these things at that age and stage of life. There may be a book or something that's out there, prayerfully, that's been published that can help to bridge the gap between adult language and experiences and childhood language and experiences, so that they can better understand, put it in layman's language and experiences, so that they can better understand, put it in layman's terms for them on their level. But it's definitely important to talk about it. Don't just not talk about it and avoid it and expect there not to be an elephant in the room. Look away from the elephant that is clearly in the room. The third point, a way to help children recover is talking to them. A way to help children recover is talking to them about healthy relationships. Help them to learn from the abusive experience by teaching them about what healthy relationships are and are not. Help them know what is healthy when they start romantic relationships of their own. This should actually be something that you're building upon, even as going on the playground and somebody hitting you or being mean to you or calling you out your name or whatever. Highlight that people who really genuinely care about you don't treat you that way, and we don't accept poor treatment from other people. We don't allow that to happen. It's just putting that bug in them and could be building their self-esteem and helping them to establish healthy boundaries. That if you're going to treat me this way, then I'm not going to be your friend, or I'm not going to be a part of this, or I'm not going to come around anymore. So things of that nature. I think definitely a key age is during their teenage or adolescent years, because at this point they're liking little boys and little girls and they're wanting to get into relationships. So it's important they're liking little boys and little girls and they're wanting to get into relationships. So it's important for them to know that what was is not the way that it needs to be in the future. How are we going to make this different? What you saw was not what you want to continue to see. You don't want to perpetuate the cycle. So how are we going to destroy that cycle? Expectation and the roles of the partner is or should be what you can accept and what you can't accept. And for the most part, knowing yourself is half the battle, because if you know that you don't like being hit, you don't like being cursed out, you don't like being talked down to or embarrassed or humiliated or whatever, then you know that you're not going to be compatible with someone who does these things. So I think it's important that also a lot of times we rush into relationships without a friendship, because if you're friends with a person, you get to experience life with them on a different level. And there are going to be times where you get to see them upset or get to see them angry on a different level. And there are going to be times where you get to see them upset or get to see them angry, or they may experience a loss or a grief and they're grieving. So if you allow, time will tell and show you things that could help you prevent unhealthy things in the future. So just talk to your children, your teens, and for what healthy is. If all they've seen is unhealthy, talk to them about boundaries. Let your child know that no one has the right to touch them or make them feel uncomfortable. And this could even go into a conversation when they're younger about good touch and bad touch during bath time, where you highlight that these are your private parts. Private means try to look at these parts. Nobody should be near these parts. Also, this includes family members as it pertains to nobody has the right to touch you. That includes family members, teachers, coaches, or other authority figures. Also, it's important to explain to your child that he or she does not have the right to touch. Also, it's important to explain to your child that he or she does not have the right to touch another person's body, because that will hopefully, prayerfully cut out the bullying. You don't have a right to hit people. You don't have a right to be hit by people. If someone tells them to stop, they should do so right away. So if you're pushing or shoving or whatever, play fighting, and someone says stop, that you stop. That's the end of it. Sometimes what happens after repeat victimization, you lose your voice. Trauma does something to a child and you lose your voice. So you may feel like something wrong or hurting you or something. You may not say stop or don't do that. You may just be quiet, sit there and take it. Like I said, take one for the team. So there are times when someone will tell you to stop, and there are times when you need to read someone's body language, or you need to just see that they're not enjoying this experience. They're not even hitting you. Fifth way to help your child recover after experiencing and seeing domestic violence in the home is helping them find a reliable support system. So in addition to a parent, this can be, but is not limited to, a school counselor. Prayerfully, the school counselor is equipped to deal with these sorts of things, or another trusted adult who can provide ongoing support. Know that school counselors are required to report domestic violence or abuse if they suspect it. Now, if you go to a school counselor and you're telling them what's happening, they no longer suspect it. It's substantiated. Telling them what's happening, they no longer suspect it. It's substantiated. Or they're taking your word for it, but they may still look for ways to substantiate it. So at this point, you tell the school counselor, or there are certain things that you tell your therapist or your counselor, and they have to report it because somebody's life is in danger or potentially in danger. The sixth way to help a child recover from previous experience with domestic violence is to get them professional help, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short. It's a type of talk therapy or have experienced violence or abuse. And I would also add play therapy, because typically children play things and scenarios in their mind, even if it's things that have scared them or things that they have experienced. A lot of times you can tell if or when a child has been sexually abused, because if you give them a doll with clothes on, the first thing they do is take the clothes off and things of that nature. So the way a child plays can definitely be a mirror into their soul as to some things that they've seen or things that they've experienced. Also, with play therapy, sometimes they're allowed to draw, and the colors that they use or the words that they use and the colors that they use or the words that they used or things of that nature, they will begin to draw about it. If they're angry or if all the expressions are sad or negative or angry, or they're always, physically in someone's face, or somebody's on the ground, or there's a gun, or different things like that, like through their eyes and their experiences. As it pertains to cognitive behavioral therapy, broken down, cognitive or cognitions has to do with your thoughts. And basically, every thought begins in your mind. Before the behavior or the action comes, it begins with a thought. The Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Once it gets into your heart, now you're just about to act on that thing. So cognitive behavior helps to change, reform, reframe your thoughts so that your behaviors in turn change. For example, if I have had an experience with abandonment, and I don't like goodbyes, then I may have a traumatic reaction when it comes to goodbyes. I may become emotional, or I may, like they said previously, have separation anxiety, and that could show up in different ways. It could show up in a panic. I have an adverse effect when it comes to saying goodbye because I have a previous childhood wound of abandonment. One way to reformulate that thought is to think about times when goodbye doesn't necessarily mean a loss or you'll never see them again. Or instead of saying goodbye, it could be movie John Q. Instead of saying goodbye, his son wanted to say see you later because that's what his dad had taught him, or something like that. That was just their thing, because goodbye seems so final. Unless you say goodbye for now or something, that for now may help to ease or take the edge off as well. But it just depends. So help to ease or take the edge off as well. But it just depends. So you would recalibrate how you think and even some of the language that you would use, because that can trigger or not trigger the way that you think, and then your behavior will in turn change. Usually, CBT is especially helpful with children who have experienced anxiety or other mental health problems as a result of trauma. During CBT, a therapist will work with your child to turn negative thoughts into more positive ones. That's that cognitive piece. The therapist can also help the child learn healthy ways to cope. Mechanisms is going to be important because stress is just inevitable. So after you've come from a stressful environment and home situation, you've been delivered from that. But now there's a certain level of a stress and demand that you're expected to produce. At home, you're expected to produce. At home, you may have chores or things that you're expected to do with your friends or whatever, just within the family. Let's say you're the oldest child, so you may have more responsibility or things of that nature. So stress in and of itself is inevitable. Therefore, it's important to have ways to cope with and deal with stress. The last little blurb says your doctor can recommend a mental health professional who works with children who have been exposed to violence or abuse. Many shelters and domestic violence organizations also have support groups for kids as well as adults. They are not alone and helping them process their experiences, non-judgmental place. And one of the benefits of support groups is that a lot of times the one that's overseeing or facilitating a group doesn't necessarily have to do all of the work. Attendees will do some of the work. Like if you say something like, I'm stupid, or I should have known better, or it's my fault that I got hit, or something like that, there'll be a matter of time before somebody else that's also probably experienced that what you've experienced or worse will say, no, it's not your fault because you didn't do anything, or they chose to hit you because you didn't do anything, or they chose to hit you. That's their fault, or that's their anger that they have to deal with, or things of that nature. So it really can be impactful to hear that from your peers as opposed to the adults in your life, because of course they're gonna want to help you feel better and make things better and fix things in your life. But to hear it from influential, and you could actually find some healthy friendships, because one of the indicators was not having having many friends or not being able to make friends or things of that nature. So you two could become friends and a support for one another as a result of your common experience, or by virtue of the fact that the main thing that I definitely want you to pull from this is to think about your childhood, to think about if you've exhibited some or all of these things as a result of your experience with domestic violence. And also think about your children and how this may have shown up in their own drugs. Were they having unprotected sex? Were they promiscuous? Were they smoking? Were they staying out? Were they running away? And things of that nature. As while you were going through what you were going through, how were they sending you signs, or what were the red flags that they too were hurting? It doesn't matter how old you are. Let's say this happened and you've gotten remarried and things are better and so on and so forth. It's never too late to say, I apologize or forgive me for taking you through that experience, for being in a relationship for an extended period of time with someone that hurt us both, or that hurt you, or whatever it is. The child on the inside of that, or whatever it is, the child on the inside of that, now adult possibly, could be longing for that. Like that could release their soul from a prison that it's been in, feeling like it's their fault, or feeling like my mom loved them more than me, my dad loved them more than me. They put his or her needs before mine to the side. They didn't meet my needs anymore. Our relationship shifted. It used to just be me and mom doing everything, but when he or she came, now it's all three of us, and now they want to spend time alone, and now I feel pushed to the side, or things of that nature. So it's just important. Like I said, it's never too late. I don't care if you're 50 years, your child is in their 30s. It's never too late to say, please forgive me. You never know what that will do for their heart, for their soul, for someone to acknowledge, I was messed up and I made decisions or didn't make decisions that inevitably caused you to be didn't make decisions that inevitably caused you to be messed up. And I'm sorry that you went on to repeat the cycle that you saw me in, or still see me in, just different things. It's definitely hard enough growing up, going through all these different ages and stages of life, with navigate who I am and wanting to be accepted, wanting to belong, and wanting to experience love, and not experiencing the type of love that you give out, not experiencing the type of love that you deserve. It's challenging. I just think it's never too late. It's never too late to go to counseling. Maybe now you guys are at a place one another and talk, and you're, as a parent or a mother or whatever, you're open to hearing how this was for me as a child. Why I maybe went out and start stripping, or was very promiscuous, or start to run away, or why I was in the gang, or why I had substance away, or why I was in the gang, or why I had substance abuse issues and had to go to rehab and I was only 14 years old or something. All of these are red flags. They're signs and they're indicators that there's a deeper issue. They're signs and they're indicators that seeds have been sown into the soil of the soul of that child, and they have produced after their own kind. And the seeds that are sown are not always the positive ones. There's positive and negative ones. And the negative ones seem to have the worst associated consequences, the long-term effects. There are some theories in trauma, it's always with you. There's no real way to heal. There's no real way to fully recover. It will always be there. And to some extent, it will. Like previously stated, you can't erase your mind. You can't take a big pencil or a magical eraser and erase your thoughts and your memories and the flashbacks and the dreams, but you can change how you see them. Change how you see the people in your life. A lot of times we are really hard and we ride down on our parents, but a lot of times they could only give us what they had, which was very little. And sometimes it was nothing. You can only pour into someone. It was nothing. You can only pour into someone what is poured into your container. And if you're on empty, you have nothing to pour. Sadly, but true, a lot of our parents didn't have anything to give, to pour, to contribute, anything to spare. So I think of today's episode, I just want you to remember that God has the final say-so about where you have been, where you are, and where you're going. You're simply in the process of becoming who God created, ordained, purposed, and destined you to be. Until next time, miracles and blessings to you today and every day.
Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs